A tax freight train is bearing down on your retirement. To protect yourself, you'll have to harness the power of zero.
Hello there, David McKnight, author of The Power of Zero. Welcome to the podcast today. This is episode 8, and we've got a treat for you today. By the way, if you would like to get a hold of me, davidmcknight.com. If you want to learn more about me or any of my other books, happy to see you on the website. We've got some interesting calculators and other resources that can be found there as well. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about Clark Howard. I've long been a fan of Clark Howard. I love a lot of the stuff he's done. He's got a nationally syndicated radio program, and I think he has a lot of good things to say. In the last 2 weeks, however, ClarkHoward.com has taken issue with what we call the life insurance retirement plan. They even talked a little bit about the Power of Zero book. So I wanted to respond to a couple of things in that article. And I think that as we explore some of the things that they brought up in their article, I think it'll be instructive. I think it will sort of flesh out a lot of the different questions that you may have vis-a-vis the Power of Zero paradigm. So let's jump into this article. I will share the words from ClarkHoward.com in quotes, and then when I'm making my own commentary, there won't be any quotes at all. That way, you'll be able to distinguish between what Clark Howard is saying versus what I'm saying. So he starts off his article saying, quote, "What if there were a way for you to avoid paying taxes in retirement? That's the promise offered by a life insurance retirement plan. Read on to learn what money expert Clark Howard thinks about this somewhat controversial financial tool." One of our readers named Hank wrote in to ask Clark with the following question. My wife and I recently signed up for a retirement planning class. This class was based upon the book, The Power of Zero. The hope is to spread your retirement funds into 3 different buckets so you will avoid paying income taxes in retirement. They are pushing us to purchase a LIRP or LIRP. What can you explain about this book? And are LIRPs a good tool to utilize? Close quote. So let me jump in here. First of all, there's no retirement planning class out there that's based upon the book, The Power of Zero. There is a retirement planning class, that's maybe what he's referring to, that I've created that hundreds of advisors across the country utilize, which is called the Changing World Retirement Planning. One of the principal themes of that book is, hey, everything that you were taught in your youth, everything in your parents' retirement that they told you would be true regarding your retirement may not necessarily be the case. We've got a new approach to retirement planning, a new world in which people are retiring. We've got to approach things differently. But the Power of Zero is not the text for that class. Sometimes advisors will hand out the Power of Zero as a homework assignment, but it's certainly not the basis of that class in terms of the textbook. There are actually workbooks that go through lots of other things besides Power of Zero type material. But the workshop does basically convey the idea that, hey, in a rising tax rate environment, there is a mathematically perfect amount of money to have in your taxable and tax-deferred buckets, and everything above and beyond that perfect mathematical amount should be systematically repositioned to tax-free. That's a pretty radical idea, because not all that many people out there necessarily are writing about not that many authors or journalists are writing about the fact that tax rates in the future are likely to be dramatically higher than they are today. But mathematically, it's a proven principle that if tax rates are going up, you're better off shifting your money to tax-free. So back to Clark, quote, "Okay, let's take a step back. What exactly are life insurance retirement plans, or LIRP? According to U.S. News and World Report, LIRPs are a kind of whole or universal life insurance policy that is marketed as being great because there's no income limit to do one. You can make unlimited annual contributions. There are no penalties on early withdrawals, and you pay no annual tax on investment gains." Okay, close quote. There's a lot of loaded language in this article, so I have to sort of parse truth from error, and there's a lot of strawman arguments. LIRPs are not great any more than Roth IRAs are great, or Roth 401ks are great, or Roth conversions are great. All of these tools can be used when appropriate in harmony with each other so that cumulatively they add up to a massive quantum difference for your retirement. So the LIRP, in contrary to a lot of other people in the industry, I would not classify as great. I would classify it as a tool that, when used appropriately, can solve certain problems. It's not the end-all be-all. It's certainly not a panacea or a silver bullet, but it's something that can be used to complement all of the other tax-free streams of income that you'll be utilizing in your efforts to get to the 0% tax bracket in retirement. So that is something I really want to bring home here, that the LIRP is not a savior. It's not the silver bullet. It's simply something that can be utilized to accomplish certain things that the other tax-free alternatives cannot accomplish. You don't use it in every scenario, but in certain scenarios, it can be utilized to do things that the other things can't. So I think that if there are people out there in the industry that are saying, let's use the LIRP to the exclusion of all the other tax-free options that are available, I think that's it's a bit irresponsible, because there's so many other good options out there that can complement what the LIRP professes to be able to do. By the way, how do I define an LIRP? An LIRP is a bucket of money that gets treated a little bit differently than those other buckets of money that we talked about in some of the prior podcasts. Your money goes into a bucket. As that bucket fills, as your money grows, your bucket begins to fill. Only the IRS says that the growth on the money in this bucket is going to be treated differently than, and in fact, under a different section of the IRS tax code than 401ks, IRAs, so on and so forth. And what does that section of the IRS tax code say? It says that you can touch your money pre-59.5, no penalty. As your money grows, you receive no 1099s. When you take the money out, if you take it out the right way, and that's by way of policy loans, you can take it out tax-free, meaning it doesn't show up as reportable income on your tax return. There are no contribution limits, no income limitations, and if history serves as a model, there may be no legislative risk, meaning you may be grandfathered if they change the rule on these things down the road. So really what it is, it's a bucket of money with a spigot, and we'll talk about what that spigot does and why it's required. But really, you can't talk about the LIRP without talking about one of the primary reasons why you would have an LIRP, and that's that it has a death benefit. You have to have a need for life insurance to be able to do the LIRP. But a lot of people who are rapidly approaching retirement, their house is paid off, their kids have moved out, they don't need life insurance. And a lot of people, in fact, are dumping their life insurance at this stage in the game. So the companies that sponsor LIRPs say, hey, look, we get it. We recognize that. So we've done something to sweeten the pot. In the event that somewhere down the road you should need long-term care, we will give you your death benefit while you're alive for the purpose of paying for it. I have helped thousands of people get to the 0% tax bracket over my 20-year career. And I would say that more than half of the people that utilize the LIRP utilize it because of that long-term care feature. In fact, even the Wall Street Journal says this is a reasonable and responsible way to use these programs for the purpose of paying for a death benefit that doubles as long-term care. Should you die peaceful in your sleep 30 years from now, never having needed the long-term care, someone still gets a death benefit. So nobody's painting this as a silver bullet. We're simply saying it's got some attributes that allows it to accomplish some things that all of your other investments don't allow it to accomplish. All right, keep going with Clark. Quote, but the downside is that LIRPs tend to be padded with massive commissions for the people who sell them. And as a general rule, LIRPs usually make the most sense for people who earn more than $350,000 per year because of the supposed tax benefit they offer for folks in higher income tax brackets. Let me take this in two parts. Number one, I've written this in all of my books. The fees on average per year over the life of the program, over the life of an LIRP, aren't any higher than your traditional 401k. They're a little bit higher in the early years because it takes some expense to get these programs off the ground. They've got to pay the advisor in an ongoing way. They've got to service you as you go through retirement. They've got to pay for a medical exam. They've got to pay for medical records. So there's expenses in getting these things off the ground. So those expenses tend to be front loaded, but they rapidly disappear once you get beyond about the 10th year. And so they're a little higher in the early years. They're a lot lower in the subsequent years. But when you average out over the life of the program, it's going to cost you about 1.5% of your bucket per year, on average, over the life of the program. That's very, very similar to your 401k. Your 401k if you were to go up to your, a typical 401k advisor and say, what are my all-in expenses for my 401k? He would say probably at least 1.5%, if not higher. Okay. So, the moral of the story here is whatever road you take in life, somebody's making 1.5%. The question is, what are you getting in exchange for that 1.5%? In the case of a LIRP, you're getting a death benefit that doubles as long-term care. So you're getting something very useful in exchange for that 1.5%. Now, I'm not sure why he came up with this artificial threshold of $350,000 per year as the income that you would need to be able to do an LIRP. That doesn't correspond to any tax bracket. Not in 2017. It's not a threshold for any particular tax bracket, nor in 2018 is it a threshold. It's almost like he said, if you're wealthy, you should do this. And wealthy people make, about $350,000 or more. I think it would be more responsible to say, if anything, that this is a useful tool for people that have a modified adjusted gross income of $199,000 or more if they've maxed out their Roth IRA and have no other, tax-free buckets to contribute to. But even then, I can make the case that if you made less than $199,000, there could be a very reasonable and responsible way to use an LIRP to benefit your financial situation. So I think the $350,000, I'm not sure where he got that number from, but I don't think it's rooted in reality. So back to Clark. Quote, what's Clark's take? By the way, this is not Clark Howard that wrote this article. It's a guy named Theo Theumann, I believe is how you pronounce his last name, who is on Clark's staff and has written a couple books with Clark. So really, it's coming from clarkhoward.com, and it's meant to embody Clark's beliefs, but it's not actually written by Clark. What's Clark's take on universal life? Clark Howard has long said any insurance that has the word universal and is radioactive for your wallet. As mentioned before, these plans have huge commissions for the agents that sell them, but the worst part is that these policies have enormous ongoing fees and often run out of money. Okay, so again, I take exception to any financial guru, and this could be Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey, Clark Howard, Susie Orman. They paint everything with a very, very broad brush. They are in the business of dispensing general financial planning advice, generally for people that make less than $75,000 a year. Dave Ramsey is an expert in helping you get out of debt. So if you make 50 and you spend 55, Dave Ramsey is a good guy to follow. Again, you can't get custom tailored financial plans from financial gurus because that's not what they're paid to do. That's not what they set out to do. I've discussed already that the fees in these programs, huge is another loaded word. When you average them out, you never do something because of what happens in the first year or even the 5 years, especially when it relates to the LIRP. You don't do an LIRP unless it's till death do you part. These things work the best the longer you keep them. The longer you keep them, the lower the internal expense in these programs. If you quit after the first year, it's the worst investment you've ever made. If you quit after the third year, it's still probably the worst investment you ever made. These are designed to be kept over the life of the program or over the life of your retirement, because the longer you keep it, you keep this thing after 20 years, the internal expenses get down to about 1.5%. You keep it past the 25th year, they're down to 1% or lower. And then if you include the death benefit in the rate of return, it gets really, really inexpensive. Can get down to about internal rate of return or internal fees of about 0.5% per year. And if by the 25th year, it's costing you 0.5%. That basically means it might as well have been 0.5% the whole time, which is very, very, very competitive with any other investment you might find out there. So don't be scared by this notion that people are saying, hey, in those first few years, you might be paying high fees. It's not what you pay in the first few years. It's what the cost is relative to the money you're investing in that bucket over the life of the program. That's the only thing that matters in a till death do we part type arrangement. The other point that he makes is he says that they often run out of money. Okay, let me just tell you this. If these are structured properly, meaning you get as little death benefit as the IRS requires of you, you stuff as much money into it as the IRS allows in an attempt to mimic all of the tax-free benefits of a Roth IRA. These, the Monte Carlo scenarios they've done on this show that it almost never runs out of money. So instead of saying often runs out of money, I would say in the course of my 20 years of helping people get to the 0% tax bracket utilizing LIRPs and other tax-free vehicles, I have never had someone run out of money. Okay. So I think that the real life experience contrasts vastly from the theoretical experience that this individual has had. I also take objection to the idea that if a salesman makes money off you, that the thing that he's selling is necessarily a bad thing. If you eliminated all of the sales commissions of the world, you wouldn't drive a car, okay? You wouldn't buy a home. There's a lot of good things that we have in our life that result in a commission to someone. That doesn't mean that those things are bad, okay? The other thing that I would say is that as you read in The Power of Zero, we never make a recommendation without backing it up with math, without giving a mathematical corroboration for what we're recommending. So if we use an LIRP, or if we use Roth IRAs or Roth conversions, we have to be able to make the case mathematically that what we recommended to you will push you further ahead than where you'd otherwise be. Otherwise, there's no basis for the recommendation. We have to have the numbers add up. The math, we have lots of, accountants, engineers, very, very intellectual people that scrutinize these numbers. And finally, after scrutinizing the numbers long enough, they get it. Hey, they're going to be $1 million or $2 million better off for doing what we're recommending versus otherwise. The other thing, the reason in the past, in the 80s, there was a program called the Universal Life, and Universal Life, the growth in your account inside that Universal Life policy was linked to interest rates. As you recall, back in the 80s, interest rates were very, very high, 10, 12%. So they were running these illustrations at 10 or 12%. So people were getting by with minimum funding these policies, $50, and these policies would stay in force. Well, what happened to interest rates over time? They came crashing down. And so these underfunded policies did have some of those capital calls. So it's almost like the author fell asleep in 1985 with his idea about universal life firmly cemented in his brain, woke up in 2018 and just started spouting off about universal life, when in reality, these are things that haven't really been an issue for our industry in almost 30 years. So anyway, so I think he needs to update his perspective with that regard. In that regard, with variable or back to Clark. Quote, with variable or index universal life, you're promised in mind-numbing language going on for page after page that you get a magic policy that's a savings account, an investment account, and an insurance account all in one. Again, a lot of loaded language here. You're promised, anytime someone says promise, that denotes a guarantee. There's a lot of these policies that don't have guarantees, and for good reason, because some of the guarantees are very, very expensive. Guarantees can be handy in certain scenarios, but not necessarily in the Power of Zero scenario. Then he says, in mind-numbing language going on for page after page, that you get a magic policy. So mind-numbing, magic. These are all descriptive words that are not used to describe facts. These are opinions. Magic policy. There's nothing magic about a life insurance policy. It's a bucket of money with a spigot. You can assess what those expenses are coming out of that spigot. You can look at the illustration and determine what the internal rate of return of your money will be over time. These are all known. These are known facts that you can ascertain for yourself. There's nothing magic about these programs. Like I said, when used as a complement to with all these other tax-free vehicles like Roth IRAs, Roth 401ks, so on and so forth, they can be an excellent, contributor to you getting to the 0% tax bracket. Where does the magic happen here? The magic happens is if you're in the 0% tax bracket and tax rates double, 2 times 0 is still 0. That's the magic here. The magic is in the paradigm. The paradigm is what's great. The paradigm says that if tax rates double and you're in the 0% tax bracket, you're shielded, you're insulated from the impact of higher taxes. The policy, back to Clark, the policy illustrations show that you will pay premiums for some time, and then magically the policy will take care of itself, but in practice it hasn't worked out that way. So again, he's setting up a straw man that says that all life insurance policies claim that your policy will be guaranteed to be in force so long as you pay premiums for a certain amount of time. This is called a disappearing premium or paid up policy. Unless you have a policy that guarantees that's not language that we can use in our industry. Okay. And remember, the guarantees do cost money. There will be a drag on your cash value if you have the guarantee that your money will, that you will no longer have to put premiums into the program. So we don't use that language, and there's certainly nothing magical about these programs. If you have money in your bucket to sustain the drips coming out of your spigot, that's what keeps the policy in force. You have to make sure that it's structured properly. You're getting as little death benefit as the IRS requires of you. You're stuffing as much money into it as the IRS allows in an attempt to mimic all of the tax-free benefits of a Roth IRA. If structured that way, Monte Carlo scenarios demonstrate that you will not likely need to pay on the policy your entire life, given certain rates of return, but it's certainly no guarantee, and there's certainly nothing magic about it. All right, back to Clark. Quote, in one case, the Los Angeles Times reported that a customer who was paying $25 a month for life insurance over the course of 23 years got a notice that his premium was going to $510 each month if he didn't pay. He would lose everything he'd paid over the years, and there would be no death benefit for his wife when he died. Again, this is going back to the 1985 paradigm where people were putting in $50 a month. They were dramatically underfunding these programs, hoping that they would get that interest rates would stay at 12%. So again, he's bringing to bear an outdated paradigm that was useful back in 1985, but nobody runs these illustrations at 12%. We run our illustrations at about 7%, okay, which is what the government allows us to show, and it's based on back-tested results that demonstrate over the last 30 years that it would have done at least 7% had this program been in force at that time. So again, another straw man argument. By the way, if the internal expenses are 1 to 1.5% over the life of these programs, and you're getting 7%, that means your money is growing 5.5 to 6% in a safe and productive way. In other words, if you get 5.5, 6% without taking any more risk than what you're accustomed to taking in your savings account, that's a pretty safe and productive way to grow at least a portion of your money. Not all of it, but a portion of it. So again, we're not looking to this program as a miracle worker. It's not designed to do something that strains credulity. It's simply designed to perform a function and to be a tool that accomplishes something that the other programs in our repertoire of tax-free investments does not necessarily accomplish. All right, quote, so that's the quick upshot of why Clark doesn't recommend LIRPs. You can read more about his reservations here and learn, he's got a hyperlink, and learn about Clark's preferred alternative level term life insurance. But by the way, I think level term life insurance, everybody should have some. I've got level term life insurance. But you also have to remember that the cost of admission to the LIRP is you got to be willing to pay for some life insurance. That's annual renewable term insurance. So what a lot of people do is they say, hey, look, if I'm paying for term insurance, I'm already budgeting for the cost of admission to the LIRP. Instead of sending that term insurance premium off to an insurance company in the form of a premium payment, why not recapture that money, dump it into your bucket, let it drip out in the form of expenses, and now start taking advantage of a huge bucket of money that wasn't previously available to you. So, hey, if you're paying for term insurance, you're already paying for the bucket. You're just not putting anything in it. So, LIRPs have a term insurance component. That's the cost of the term insurance is what drips out of your bucket. And what stays in your bucket is what grows and compounds over time that you can use to fund your retirement on a tax-free basis, or you can use it to fund your LTC along with your death benefit, so on and so forth. He continues, quote, having said that, a couple of other potential red flags jump right off the bat. from reading Hank's email to us. First off, that part about signing up for a retirement class. While it's great to broaden your understanding about retirement planning, a class may not be the best venue for that. Why not? Simply because it's hard to know if a class is straight up legitimate or if there's a hidden agenda where you're going to be sold a product or service. Unfortunately, it's often the latter, as in they are pushing us to purchase an LIRP. So remember this, if you're attending a seminar class, particularly if you're lured in with the promise of a free lunch or dinner, beware of buying a questionable fee-heavy investment from the facilitator. So again, he's conflating a retirement class with a free chicken dinner. Okay, there's a dramatic difference between the two. Retirement classes are are held at universities, and many times they're sponsored by universities. And the instructor is oftentimes a financial advisor, because he can share real world experiences with his attendees because of the clients that he's been able to advise over the years. But you have to remember that these advisors are expressly forbidden from selling anything during these classes. It's a purely educational experience. You're often given the opportunity to get a complimentary strategy session after the class is over to see how the principles in the class apply specifically to your situation. In those scenarios, solutions may be offered, but you're not compelled to. And frankly, many people take advantage of those solutions once they see the mathematical corroboration and how much more money they'll be able to spend in retirement by adopting some of these strategies. He says, quote, "That could be the most expensive free meal you've ever had," close quote. So once again, it could be an expensive proposition to get a free chicken dinner. Conversely, if you go to a retirement planning class where you're typically charged a fee, and you do implement some of those strategies that get you to the 0% tax bracket, get your Social Security tax free, extend the life of your retirement by 10, 7, 6 years, spend an extra $1.5 million in retirement. Not adopting some of these strategies could be the most expensive thing you do in your life. Okay, you could run out of money 7 to 10 years faster by not adopting some of these strategies. Wrapping up here, he says, try a robo-advisor if you're younger and just getting started. I think that robo-advisors can play a role. However, I will tell you this. You're supposed to buy low, sell high. What do most people do? They buy low, they buy high, and they sell low. Why? Because all of their investment decisions are emotion-based. They're emotion-based. Emotion-driven investing costs people more money over the life of their accumulation phase and over retirement than just about any other factor. So the question is, when you're feeling an emotional impulse to buy low and sell high, is that robo-advisor going to call you up on the phone and say, hey, I know the markets are a bit jittery, but we've got an investment objective here. We've got to stay the course, because if history serves as a model, this ship is going to turn around and things are going to, the ship is going to right itself. So I'm not convinced that robo-advisors can perform that function like a real life advisor can do. So he says, quote, when you're looking for guidance on how to create future wealth, Clark has a kind of 1-2 punch he likes for you to do based on where you are in life, particularly if you're younger. He recommends that you consider working with a robo-advisory firm. Again, robo-advisors leverage the latest in artificial intelligence and algorithm-driven portfolio management to deliver solid returns on your money, coupled with low fees. And then he gives a link where you can go see robo-advisors. Generally, robo-advisors tend to appeal to millennials and those under 40 who are used to doing things without needing to actually sit down face-to-face with someone. Fee-only financial planners can help in the gap the older you get. If you're well into middle age, chances are a robo-advisor may not be your speed. By the way, most of our clients are between ages 50 and 65. So what he's suggesting right here is that robo-advisors would in fact not be a good option for most of the people who are adopting our strategies. Why do you need to be between 50 and 65? Well, to be able to get to the 0% tax bracket and adopt our strategies, you have to have some money to be able to shift, to be able to reposition it tax-free. If you don't have any money accumulated yet, hey, go accumulate the money. Once you reach age 50, then you can come talk to us and we can talk about how to reposition these assets to tax-free. He says, you're in an entirely different boat. You've built up substantial assets and you're approaching retirement. In your case, there's no substitute for sitting down with a well-trained and educated human being like a fee-only financial planner. So he's actually recommending that the folks that are our primary target meet with he actually says a fee-only financial planner. Unfortunately, there aren't any LIRPs that are fee only. Okay, so it's hard to have your LIRP worked into the recommendation if you're fee only. A fee only financial planner can provide valuable guidance for when you've amassed a sizable portfolio. It's getting closer to when you're going to spend it. Then he has a final thought where he gets into where you can go to find out more about the power of zero. He says, notice we didn't say a word about the book, The Power of Zero, or the specific zero tax strategy advises. That's because the purpose of everything Clark does is to empower you with the knowledge to make an informed judgment about the merits of the book and whether it would or wouldn't work for your individual situation. He also says that he doesn't like fear-mongering about the increased tax rates. Clark is an optimist by nature, believes in stay-the-course style investing. So if you are an optimist by nature, I'm not sure that being optimistic necessarily translates into realistic, okay? Realistic says, let's look at the financial landscape of our country and let's figure out how things are trending. Okay. That's a responsible thing to do. I don't know how you can possibly be optimistic about the future of tax rates, but I've heard Clark say on his own show that tax rates in the future are likely to be higher than they are today, in which case Roth IRAs are the way to go. So you can be an optimist by nature and still believe that tax rates in the future are going up. And that you should therefore prepare accordingly. Okay. He says, there's no one right strategy to create long-term wealth or financial security, but there are combinations of strategies that create opportunity and real estate among them. Clark notes. I will tell you this, that if tax rates in the future are going to be higher than they are today, even 1% higher, I will tell you this, there is a one right strategy, and that's to reposition your money to tax-free. Mathematically speaking, it's irrefutable. It's irrefutable to say that your money will last longer if you get your money shifted to tax-free during a period of low income tax rates so that you avoid paying higher taxes down the road. It's math and science here, folks. There's no emotion here. There's nothing magic about it. So in conclusion, I'd simply like to say that we advocate the use of the LIRP as one of many streams of tax-free income. It should not be a workhorse by any means. It should not bear the main brunt of your retirement, savings. It's simply a complement, and when used appropriately, can accomplish a lot of things that some of these other investments we've talked about can't accomplish. The math has to make sense. You got to have a before and after comparison that's performed to demonstrate the mathematical viability of the strategy. So remember, financial gurus that paint everything with a broad brush can only get you so far, especially in a rising tax rate environment. In a rising tax rate environment, you will need to systematically reposition your highly taxable tax-deferred investments to tax-free. That is not an easy proposition. There are all sorts of landmines, there are pitfalls. You have to respect all these different thresholds to make sure your Social Security is not taxed, make sure your RMDs can be offset by your standard deduction. You have to worry about, hey, am I doing something that will cause my Medicare premiums to go up? There's all these different things that you have to worry about. So we recommend that you consult with a qualified Power of Zero advisor that can do a before and after comparison for you, lay out a roadmap, and demonstrate mathematically that what his strategy or recommendation is will mathematically push you further ahead than where you would otherwise be. So that's the show for today. Look forward to talking to you next week in episode 9. Have a great day.